Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Season 5, Episode 9, Natural Dyes in History. But first, let's see what's happening on the farm. So, as I'm recording this, it is the second week of January. We had just a very mild dusting of snow last weekend, and we had a big rainstorm yesterday. Today, the sky is beautiful. And basically, what's happening on the farm is our pullets are almost ready to start laying. One has, and the other 11 are holding out on us a little bit. Um, we had the tree company come in and trim all of our orchard trees, and some of them they had to take out because there was just a lot of what they call black knot, which is a kind of fungus, and it spread. So unfortunately, we had to take it out. And Bill said, how do you feel when you look at the orchard? And I said that it made me feel sad because they took out, I don't know, like 4 trees. And I asked him what he thought, and he said he felt hopeful. So I think that's good. One of us is hopeful. I'm going to try to be hopeful that we can get some new fruit trees in there and that they will flourish. And so that's kind of what's happening here. The sheep are just doing their winter thing. They're still not eating very much of the hay. They would rather be out eating whatever grass that there is. And because we did get this rain, and because it's been kind of mild, there is still grass growing. So they're taking care of that and just hanging out in the barn, relaxing, which is a great thing for sheep to have. Here's a little recap. This whole season has been about natural dyeing. You can access any of those episodes and the previous seasons, because this is the 5th season, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're somebody that would rather watch than listen, then you can also tune into our YouTube channel, which has all of the episodes. Because as I'm doing this, I make myself up like a little PowerPoint because I can't remember all of the stuff that I'd like to tell you guys. So it's like my little cheat program here that allows me to remember everything I wanted to talk about each episode. And so those are on YouTube, and our YouTube channel is Flying Goat Farm Yarn and Fiber Channel. So let's get into it. A lot of this stuff is so early that we don't really know, but these are conjectures by historians, paleontologists, and whatnot about how color came to be in our clothing. We have evidence that prehistoric man used earth pigments to paint in the caves, like the Lascaux caves and other places. And they used the earth pigments in burial ceremonies as well, sometimes to decorate their own skin. And we find evidence of that around 30,000 years ago. That's amazing when you think about it. And we also know that early man had access to animal skins and maybe some collected fibers that they were using for clothing. When their sheep or other woolly kind of animals would rub up against trees to like scratch themselves, sometimes they would leave little fluffs of fiber around that could be collected by the peoples there. And so the scientists think that perhaps they used the earth pigments that they were already using in the caves and on their own bodies to also dye the skins to decorate and to add their own expressions into their clothing, because we humans are we're creators. We love to create, we love to express ourselves, and even back then that was happening. We also know that cotton started to be cultivated around 5,000 years ago. And with that came the technology to spin it into a usable thread, and then to make cloth by weaving it or looping or twining, like knitting would be, making or twisting to make ropes and that kind of thing. And so all of that technology could then be transferred into making clothing for themselves. And especially, cotton was cultivated in the warmer parts of the world too. So they probably needed to have cooler clothing than furs or animal skins. So early color on textiles was probably kind of an accident, that it was a result of staining that may have come from rust or from earth pigments in the mud. But then the next thing to develop was tannin-based dyes. Those would be things that were coming from trees and some plants. So like nut hulls, like we with the black walnut, acorns, but maybe things like saffron or turmeric that people would notice. Oh, these things stain my clothing, or this stains this animal skin that I'm wearing. And these tannin-based dyes, they don't need mordants, and they probably lasted a longer time. And so that technology, that early dye technology, was cemented in the knowledge bank. And most probably there were craftspeople who became masters at this, and so they acquired more of the knowledge and provided color for the community, which leads us to the ancient Mediterranean worlds. We know that Phoenicians used this mollusk called murex to dye white fabric into a brilliant, beautiful purple, and that purple was used only for high-ranking members of the society, like the emperor or the king. And basically that mollusk is, they would kind of milk it. It has like an ink sac, and that the ink, it comes out like a milky white, but then when it's exposed to air, just like an indigo fermenting vat, when it's exposed to the air, the oxygen, it became this brilliant purple, and it was just like magic, I think. The Phoenicians effectively caused extinction of that animal. It is no longer around. There is a sister species that is in Mexico, and right now they work really hard to make sure it does not go extinct. There's only one tribe or community that has access to those animals, and what they do is that they milk the ink out, but they don't kill the animal, and then they put the animal back on the rocks. It's kind of like an abalone looking thing. Put it back on the rocks, and then they only take so many of these, but again, they're not killing them. They're putting them back on the rocks so that they can live another day and dye some more yarn next time. And I think most of the time they are just dyeing yarn, and then those threads, because it's highly prized and not very highly rare, they use it just as like ornamentation, embellishment in their weepeels. I've seen pictures of them. I've never seen it in real life. I'd like to be able to see it someday. That would be very cool. So by 1500 BC, there were well-developed dye technologies all over India and Egypt and Europe and the Central and South Americas. There were communities were investigating the plants and animals, insects in their area, and coming up with a beautiful formulary of colors from their respective places. In the Middle Ages, there were dye guilds. So these dyers were the keepers of the knowledge and the processes, and they were tasked with dyeing for the community, from the very rich, like the king and the warriors, or to the not so rich, their neighbors. Of course, the most brilliant and rare colors were reserved for the rich, the landowner, the nobility, and probably the warriors to a certain extent. When we get into the colonization, the age of exploration, then you see a crossover of these communities. So Spanish and Portuguese explorers, they were responsible for finding the red of cochineal. So cochineal was being used and cultivated in the Americas, in Central and South America. And the Spanish and Portuguese explorers brought back material, thread, and probably some of the animals as well, to their home countries. And this is probably true for some wood dyes too that would have been found in the Amazon, like Brazil wood, sapin wood, those kind of wood dyes that were being used in the Americas at the time of colonization. And of course, indigo. Indigo grows best in tropical areas. So, in Africa, in Southeast Asia, and India. And so it came to the American colonies with the slave trade. And so, the dye and the technology to use it coincided with the colonization of British in America, Africa, India, and the Caribbean. In fact, slave traders specifically took Africans who had the knowledge of growing and dyeing with indigo and growing cotton and growing rice to place on American plantations. So this was targeted kidnapping, basically, and it's just another horrible manifestation of slavery that needs to be acknowledged. In 1856, William Parker, a chemist, discovered the color mauve. It was a byproduct of coal tar. So this set into motion the race to find dyes that were more stable, easier to use, and that were byproducts of the petroleum industry that was just getting started. And natural dyes started to fade in the industrial world at the same time because these dyes were available to the masses. And even though they were less light fast and wash fast than natural dyes, they were cheaper. The economics of using a petroleum byproduct made these dyes less expensive and easier to use. And by the 1880s, so basically talking 30 years from the discovery, every little country store had a line of synthetic dyes that was available to the community. So these colors are also what we would consider pure colors. They are a single molecule that gives a single color, whereas natural dyes contain many, many different compounds. And so you get a very nuanced kind of color with natural dyes, but the pure colors they only come from synthetic dyes, which is again what we're seeing in fast fashion, right? If you want, a screaming neon green or neon pink outfit, you're not going to be able to get that from a natural dye source. It has to come from pure dyes, which are most probably synthetic. But natural dyeing never actually died. The knowledge was carried by small groups of people. Many of the groups that carry the knowledge were indigenous groups. They were working in traditional crafts in their communities, their traditional clothing, or perhaps like in India, Pakistan, they were, making, they were using jacquard looms to make beautiful cloth, and they would dye it with the dyes that they had on hand, which would have been natural dyes. And so you find highly developed natural dye practices in African, Asian, and Central and South American nations. There was a resurgence in the 20s and also in the 60s with the hippies. And now there's another big interest in natural dyeing. And I think that's in response to climate change and the pollution of fast fashion. And many more people are interested in using natural materials and working more slowly and developing the practice of clean living. And I think that's probably why you're listening today, or why you started to listen to my podcast, since I've been talking about fiber shed and working slow and clean for a while now. So here is our natural dye highlight of this episode, and it's the dye lac, LAC. So this is like a cochineal. It is a scale insect called Kyrialaca, and it's found throughout Southeast Asia, India, Nepal, Burma, Bhutan, and South China. It originally, of course, was found in the wild, and now it's being cultivated, just like cochineal is. So this is a little beetle, It burrows into trees and it forms a colony. Then the colony, the animals secrete with this resin, which is called shellac, that covers the colony and protects it from invaders, from predators, that kind of thing. So this was first found when they were uh, looking around in the forest for things to use for materials. And shellac, we know, is a a resin that you can paint onto wood or other surfaces and it makes a very um, clear and hard surface of protection. So what happens is that they harvest these uh, these pieces of wood, and they call it stick shellac. They extract the shellac from it, and what's left is the dye compounds from the animals or in the animals. This dye makes beautiful purples and reds, just kind of a cherry red color. It is pH sensitive, just like cochineal. So the more acidic environment that it's in, it's more red. The more basic um, medium that it's in, it will be more purple. It's a beautiful, beautiful dye, and I love using it. Again, this is not something that you can find by foraging in our area or in the United States. So this is something that you need to get from a reputable fair trade dealer. And my farm yarn highlight is our fusion. And it is, oh, I just love this yarn. It's a blend of mohair and cormo and some colored BFL. And it's the colored BFL is from Henrietta, who looks like she's a black sheep. Her skin is black, but as her fleece grows out, it kind of bleaches in the sun, so it becomes a lovely caramel color. And because it was blended with white fiber, with the white mohair, white cormo, it has a lovely kind of oatmeal color. I haven't dyed any of it just because I love the color of it naturally. It is a 2-ply worsted weight yarn. Each skein is about 150 yards long, and we're selling it for $30 a skein. This would make a lovely sweater, lovely hat. Um, it has great luster that's coming because of the mohair and BFL are both highly lustrous fibers. So it has just a beautiful sheen to it. And we have quite a bit of it because we did a run of it. And it hasn't, I haven't really promoted it very much. So it's kind of one of those secrets, one of my little secret stashes here in the studio. Of course, it is online and you can find it and buy it there. So until next time, happy making. And I hope maybe you're even naturally dyeing or thinking about naturally dyeing. But in any case, until next time, happy making.